Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. How do you police the internet? Part one of our discussion, we talked about how the government, since last week's attacks in Paris, has been cracking down on hate speech, particularly over the web. We're going to look now a little bit more at what new measures can we do to monitor what's going on over the internet. With us, Nathalie Goulet. She chairs the French Senate's Commission on Jihadist Networks. Also joined again by human rights attorney Mugambi Jouet. Etienne Drouard, intellectual property lawyer. Some of the work you've done as well has involved things like the right to be forgotten in the case of Google. And we're also joined by Fabrice Epel-Bouin, who teaches at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. Now, the Prime Minister, when it comes to all of this, spelling out there's going to be new laws. He told Parliament Tuesday, tougher laws to monitor the internet will be unveiled in the coming days.
An
extraordinary situation requires extraordinary measures. But I stress that we should never let these exceptional measures undermine the principle of law and our values.
All right, exceptional measures. Nathalie Goulet, on that commission you chair.
Yeah.
Do you get the sense that you need new laws?
Oh, no. Absolutely not.
You've got what you need.
Well, we got 14 anti-terrorism law in less than 16 years. The last one, the ink is not dry yet. So first, we have to improve this regulation. We need money, we need man, we need policeman, we need judge. We need a lot of things, but we don't need new regulation. Maybe except for some intelligence services, which need more cooperation or more precise point. But really, we don't need any new regulation. You know, I open a hashtag, no new law, just money.
Etienne Drouard, more means, more manpower, but is there a call, in your view, for new laws?
Some will be adopted because I'm sure that the political population will need something to be done and to show that an action has been taken. And I agree that we don't.
But it's all smoke and mirrors?
I hope we could redress some situations where administrative decisions for surveillance or wiretapping are now being able to be taken in France without any control except the authorization of a public officer alone without any publicity of his decision. So we have this kind of...
Hang on a sec. You're saying that administrative decision can be made to wiretap without a judge?
No. Yes, with a public officer placed close to the...
When you say a public officer, you mean a police?
No,
civil servant.
Civil servant beside the Minister of the Interior, who makes the decision. The control of this decision is just to see whether or not the right articles have been viewed in this request for surveillance by the right person for the right purposes, which would be just saying this is against terrorism, and then we don't have any more control of this. Decisions are made for 2 months. They may be renewed without any limitation. And this was adopted in November 2013. Decrees were expected for January 1st.
Yeah, because in France, when you pass a bill, you then have to have
to put details
executive
in another
decrees that are published with it.
So it was for January 1st.
It's not really.
They were not published.
Not yet.
So we still don't have the law on the books, in fact.
No.
For a law adopted 12 or 14 months ago. So
okay, so you'd like to see a judge or an investigating magistrate have a say when you decide to wiretap. Do you expect, listening to the Prime Minister and his speech on Tuesday, that that's what's going to happen?
I would expect not only me, but the European Convention on Human Rights, our constitution.
But are you betting on it?
Yeah.
You think Daniel Valls will involve magistrates in this?
Because the European legislation basing and used as a ground for these laws has been rejected by the European Commission in March this year. So anyway, for European reasons or for French reasons,
the French don't want to fall foul of
we will need to
European
redraft
law.
it.
Fabrice Epel-Bouin, are you optimistic on that score?
I am not at all optimistic. My guess is that giving so much power, being able to put anything, anybody under surveillance is such a power that the executive branch will take it and grasp it and use it. You can't give a candy to a child without expecting him to grab the candy and eat it. This is what we're doing with surveillance and the executive branch. We're deeply destabilizing the equilibrium between the executive branch, the parliamentary, and justice. This is going to affect democracy big time, and it could even get worse. We could give the executive branch in a future election to some extremist party, and this will get really nasty.
Nathalie Goulet, are the measures being talked about effectively giving a blank check to civil servants, to the executive branch?
No, we put a frame, you know, we have a frame, we have a surveillance by a judge or from an administrative court or judiciary court, and then there is nothing regarding a comparison with a candy. I mean, it's a tool, and some tools, we need them. But right now, what we don't need is a new law, because as we said previously, the decree are not out yet, and the law is not ready. It's as simple as that. So we don't need anything new as long as we don't have the previous law ready for action.
Mugambi Jouet, at the end of the day, will it be like with the Patriot Act in the United States? Does France need a French Patriot Act?
I would strongly advise against a form of Patriot Act for France for a number of reasons. First of all, history suggests that these sort of dragnet surveillance systems are not only violations of privacy and human rights, but also they're very ineffective in facing terrorism. Because
but we heard people say on Monday when we were listening back to what was said at the march, some said, look, I'm ready to give up a little bit of freedom if it means being safe.
Well, that may be the case for a number of lay citizens, but if we look at the pros and cons of these laws, like I said, not only are they violations of privacy, but they tend to generate so much information because dragnet surveillance systems, in fact, generate too much information that's very hard to monitor. And that's one reason why they're not a good system. And with regard to France, there were laws on the books already, and the perpetrators of the terrorist attacks in Paris were already under surveillance, but there was not enough staff to focus on these individuals. Furthermore, there have to be other methods to tackle the roots of the problem, not simply a responsive measures against terrorism, but also tackling the roots of the problems, which would include sociological issues and geopolitical issues.
All right, but let me ask you, Fabrice Epelboin, this issue of mass surveillance and what they call, I guess, they call it metadata?
We're not yet into mass surveillance. Where we're heading right now.
Haven't intelligence services gotten better at it since
2001? Yeah, we're getting better, but still, mass surveillance is not made to fight terrorism. It's not designed for that. It's made to fight any form of social unrest, anything. For example, the best software there is to gather all these metadata and everything is called Palantir. Palantir is used by the Indian government to fight the Maoist guerrilla. Nothing to do with terrorism. But
it could be used for...
Yeah, why not? It could
jihadists.
be used. It also could be used to fight any forms of political opposition. It might be used to use this way. It has been used in the past, in the 80s, by another socialist government to spy on political opposition. It's a French history of doing this.
Nathalie Goulet, what do your voters tell you in your home district in Normandy?
Right now they're scared. But they understand the magnitude of the problem, and you know, the smallest city, the smallest town of my constituency last week, 22 people are living there. You know, it's really like confetti. You know, they put on the city hall, let's say, a big "I am Charlie." You know, they feel very concerned about that. And what I would like to say that Patriot Act didn't prevent any Boston attack. Patriot Act didn't prevent anything. And then Americans are really very guilty for what happened in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, and all over, and become rogue states instead of state of law. So regarding Patriot Act...
And do you think lawmakers agree with you, that they're wary of what happened with the Patriot Act?
Well, it depends what they are fishing as ballots. But for one thing is sure regarding the Patriot Act, and you never speak about that, it's the financial network. And regarding the financial network, the Patriot Act is really interesting because you have to follow the money too. And that is a good aspect of the problem, and it's a good way to fight terrorism, is to follow the money. And Patriot Act is really efficient on this matter.
In fact, technology may be efficient. But for me, efficiency doesn't mean only to find the information, but also which information to collect before. On any kind of people, on the whole population, because maybe among us we have terrorists. No, the answer is we should be sure to target the right person. And for that, we need control. It's not a matter of technical efficiency, it's a matter of democracy, in fact.
One of the pitfalls of the Patriot Act in the United States is that once you give the government so much leeway to conduct surveillance, it becomes very hard to withdraw that power from the government, because anyone who's going to argue against these measures will be called soft on terrorism. And once a country takes that road, it's very difficult to go back.
All right, part one of our discussion, Fabrice Epelboin was mentioning how part of the problem for the French is they're playing by American rules. That's certainly the case when you take a look at getting the big internet giants like Google and Facebook to agree with you to hand over a lot of that data. The head of Google France told partner station France 2 that the internet giants already cooperating.
At Google, we've already got a policy concerning YouTube and the sort of content that we want to have on our sites. In the policy that's already in place, there are many things that are designated as unacceptable. But there are also instances where there is, for example, some illegal content, and there the police will ask us to take it down. Over the weekend, we received several such requests, and we took the videos down as quickly as possible.
Took the videos down as quickly as possible. How much do the likes of Google, Facebook, and others cooperate?
Oh, as much as they can, until the point where they will consider that there is not much difference between Iran and France, because both have freedom of speech, very restricted by their local law. And both will ask for censorship on this topic and this topic and this topic. And at one point, it's going to be difficult, because if we have content, let's say terrorist content, popping all over the place, they'll be surrounded by content labeled as terrorist, and they won't be effective to put them down. This is a fight. Zine Ben Ali, the former dictatorship of Tunisia, fought against his own population, and he lost. We have to find another way to grasp the problem. It's a real serious problem.
Because I'm asking the question because David Cameron's at the White House this Thursday, and top of the agenda is convincing Barack Obama to get those U.S. tech giants to agree more.
Yeah, except that he has a very different view on free speech in the UK than we have. The UK view on free speech is very close to the American view. We have a very specific view of free speech, and we have a very specific problem.
So what's
regarding
David Cameron
censorship.
asking for in that case?
Cameron is just asking to end any kind of privacy on the internet by forcing people not to use encryption, and that's a very different problem. It can't work, because basically you need encryption to connect to your bank. You need encryption for many privacy-related stuff. You need encryption if you're a lawyer. You need encryption if you're a journalist. You need encryption for many, many jobs. So this law is just going to be another stupid law.
Cameron is gaining cooperation, and better cooperation. He would like to have the same means and powers and partnership as the NSA had to execute with these US giants. And this is effectively what they need, in fact, and what we would all need. We don't need more legal cooperation. We need more technical capacities and cooperation. And it comes from the US government or from the US giants. And Cameron is doing the right diplomatic journey in this, not only for the law it will enact or not in the UK and in France we don't care what it will enact, but this cooperation initiative is very good for soft cooperation on software, encryption, etc. So it will make it more efficient so that they may have...
So there'll be bilateral agreements on what's encrypted and what's not?
And we don't know if it will be even published. But this kind of cooperation is the key point for efficiency, technical efficiency. It doesn't preclude on the legal debate.
So Nathalie Goulet, if all these tech giants are in the US, if the world goes on the internet by American rules, should the French government be sending the prime minister or the president cap in hand to Washington?
In fact, Bernard Cazeneuve just announced this afternoon...
The Interior Minister.
Yes, the Interior Minister announced this afternoon in the Senate that he will travel beginning of February to the state to discuss with the major Google and everybody about a kind of memorandum of understanding, but about the content. If they can withdraw some content by themselves because they are too violent or too against the law, maybe it will be also a way to work. But he already announced that this afternoon.
What's the conclusion you draw in terms of if you want to fight in the fight against terror?
Conclusion, I mean, we are just starting the process. My only and single conclusion is that we need money and we need men and we need policemen and we have enough law. I'm sorry to repeat it again and again, but internet will not be the solution. I was in London 2 weeks ago for this new bill, which is also very tough regarding the IP. And it's absolutely
the internet protocol, just like
internet
the address for each computer.
but it's just a past theory because IP is not useful anymore because you cannot identify people with IP. It's not useful anymore. So it's just old-fashioned way to think about that. So it's better it's better to discuss with the people than to stay abroad and then to try to understand because all those people are not used to this technical point, and we have to discuss and to learn about that to be able to act.
Mogambi Jouet, we're talking what's still an emotional moment here in France. It's still an active investigation in the case of what happened. As a result of this, do you see bad laws being passed in haste?
That's certainly a danger. In times of crises, the public can be persuaded by politicians to take laws that are draconian, that go too far in violating civil liberties in the name of security. And also, as I mentioned earlier, these events have been dubbed the 9/11 of France. But there's a big difference with 9/11 in the U.S., which is that all the hijackers that were responsible for the 9/11 attacks in the U.S. were foreign citizens, whereas the recent perpetrators of the attacks in Paris were all French citizens. And the root of the problem is the radicalization of wayward French youths who do not feel like they belong in French society. And unless this root of the problem is tackled, all the other measures that we've talked about, such as repressing free speech or increasing government surveillance when already there are a lot of laws in the books, are not going to resolve the problem.
And do you agree with Senator Goulet that what you need is more manpower and more police, and that there should be more surveillance?
Absolutely. In general, it's important to keep in mind that in times of crises, politicians feel a lot of pressure not only to act, but to seem as if they are acting. And one of their arguments is that there are not enough laws in the books to tackle terrorists, but there are many laws in the books. And it's a broader question of whether the French intelligence services are working competently or whether they are understaffed, and even whether if they were able to generate a broader range of surveillance, whether that would be helpful, because then they would possibly generate so much information that it would be even harder for them to monitor all the suspects.
Before we go, there's the question of how wide a threat is it right now. This dispatch from the Associated Press saying that hackers have targeted some 19,000 French websites since last week. But tell us put that in perspective for us. Fabrice Appelbois, is that just a normal week?
Well, we're talking about very low-end hacking. That's the equivalent of writing an insult on the City Hall entrance. It's like putting a graffiti on a wall. It's nothing really bad, but it's a signal. It's a signal that there are many, many people on the cyberspace that are protesting. It's a form of protest, and we shouldn't take this anywhere else than a form of protest. It could escalate into something worse, but so far this is just protest going on in the cyber street.
So what should be the government's reaction?
Nothing. The only reaction to that is that people who have websites should take IT security seriously. It hasn't been done so far. There is lots of work to have on IT security. If you have a website, it's your responsibility to make it secure. And so far, since it's not visible, securing a website isn't visible until something like that happened. But there's nothing to be done except telling people, hey, you're not in a peaceful place, you're not on a peaceful planet, and if you live on the first floor, you should have some curtains to protect the entry of your door.
All right, so keep calm and build a firewall. That's the advice from Fabrice Epelbois. I want to thank you. I want to thank Nathalie Goulet. I also want to thank Mougan Bijouet and Etienne Drouard. Stay with us. James Creedon is next. It's our Media Watch segment. Hello, sir.
Good evening. A look at how the British press in particular has been reacting, and French social media, to Sky News versus France's interpretation, I suppose,
I know
of
where you're going
freedom of
with this.
expression. Caroline Forrest, it is.
She was a guest here in our studio just yesterday.
Well, there you go. And a former journalist at Charlie Hebdo, a feminist journalist who is very much in favour of a strong interpretation, I suppose, of the whole notion of freedom of press and freedom of expression. And Sky News cut her off very, very quickly when she attempted to show the front page of Charlie Hebdo, which, of course, everybody was running out to buy yesterday. It sold like hotcakes. And that is, I suppose, an image of how far she got on Sky News before the camera was quickly returned to studio, and she quickly took to social media to say that she was cut off live on air, and that this is an offence to intelligence. Now, what she was actually saying on air, before we get to the different reactions to this, is that she was sad that journalists in the UK did not support us, that they had betrayed what journalism is about by thinking that people cannot be grown up enough to decide if a drawing is offensive or not, because you're not even showing it. So her point of view is you should be allowed to see the drawing to make up your own mind as an independent, grown-up person as to whether or not it is offensive in a free society. Now, it's interesting because if you go back to 2005, when the conservative Danish daily Jyllands-Posten published 12 caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad, very few, and there was no media, in fact, in the UK that republished those cartoons at the time. So it's not new that British media have a different position to, I suppose, French media in this regard. But let's just take a look at how, that's an unrelated issue, but there is that image again on social media. She also did this, by the way, in 2008, on CNN. So she takes quite, I suppose, an activist role in imposing images that certain editorial staff have decided won't be broadcast on their airwaves. From her point of view, this is about freedom, and it is an activist attitude. Sky News is "Je suis un coward," I am a coward. So they're playing on the whole "Je suis Charlie" or "I am Charlie" meme. So it's a cowardly decision for some. Others are saying "Vive Caroline Forrest" for defending her interpretation of freedom of the expression and freedom of the media. Censoring the legitimate criticism of religion is asking for obedience, not respect, says Pierre Renaud. And a huge respect to Sky News, such a responsible act, says this other Twitter user.
So viewers divided.
Very much divided, and it seems to come down each time to the whole notion of freedom of expression, freedom of the press, versus respect. Do you take a hardline approach when it comes to freedom of expression? And I think the attitude is if you cede on any one principle of this, where is it going to end? Where is that going to stop? Whereas others will say it's more a matter of, okay, you have a certain principle, but what about being a little bit respectful about that principle and not rubbing it in people's faces? It's one thing to publish it, but what about reprinting it? And I think it's interesting. I think what informs a lot of this debate in France is context, which is often missed overseas. What was on the front cover of Charlie Hebdo the week of the attack? Michel Houellebecq, a French writer, award-winning writer, his latest book is called Submission, and it imagines a France in 2022 which has a moderately Muslim president. So I think there is this notion, and that plays into a general, I think, fear in France, that if you start to cede, that there will be something which is known as le grand remplacement, a great replacement, which has been much criticised. It's a philosophical view expressed by the far right that little by little by little, France's population is going to be replaced. So I think hardline defenders of laïcité will say you cannot cede 1 inch, because if you start to do that, we're going to start, what would you say, compromising our values, French values.
All right, so the whole world getting, I guess, involved or look into a very French argument. James Creedon, many thanks for that. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.